Hi, and welcome to this class on. Hi, and welcome to this. Hi, and welcome to this. Hi, hi, and welcome to this. Hi, and welcome. Hi, and welcome to this video about relative clauses in English. First, we need to understand what is the difference between a clause and a sentence. A clause, it says here, it's a complete idea containing a subject and a verb. The most important part here is that it's an idea. A sentence, on the other hand, it's a grammatical unit containing one or more clauses, starts with a capital letter and ends with a period. So basically, a sentence is like a container for clauses. It can have only one clause, and that is the usual sentence, or it can contain two or more clauses. That means it can have different ideas on the same sentence and that means it can have different ideas on the same sentence and therefore more than one subject or more than one verb. For example, here we have two one-clause sentences. They start with a capital letter and they end with a period. Harvey Dent became Two-Face, period. That's one sentence because it starts capital and ends with a period, and it's one clause because we have one subject, Harvey Dent, and we have one verb, became. So we only have one idea in one sentence. Another one sentence clause. Another one clause sentence. An explosion burned half of his face. Here again we have one sentence because it starts with a capital letter and it ends with a period. And we also have only one idea. The explosion that burned half of his face. We have a subject, explosion, and we have a verb, burned, and it's only one idea. So these two are one clause sentences, the usual sentences that we're accustomed to. Now, we can put these two clauses into one sentence, but we need to use what we call conjunctions. We cannot just put the two of them together because the ideas are not going to have coherence, are not going to make sense. So we use conjunctions. In this case, we use the conjunction because. And as you can see, before the conjunction before the conjunction because, we have the first clause. It starts with a capital letter. Harvey Dent became Two-Face. That's one idea. Notice how we don't have a period right there. Instead of the period, we have a conjunction. That means that it's one clause, but it's not the end of the sentence. So the conjunction because puts these two clauses together into one sentence. The second sentence, we can see that it doesn't start in a capital letter. That means it's not the start of the sentence. We are mid-sentence. And it says, an explosion burned half of his face, period. As you can see, we have the period here. So that means the whole sentence starts from Harvey Dent and ends in half of his face. And we have two ideas, we have two subjects, and we have two verbs that are put together using the conjunction because. Okay, now, so to continue, we need to understand what is the difference between subject, verb, and object. A subject is the person, thing, or animal executing the action. Who is doing stuff? Who is doing what we're talking about? Who's executing the action? The verb is the action in itself. What are we talking about? What is the subject doing? What is his action? That is the verb. And the object is the person, thing, or animal receiving the action. We'll see a little bit more later. For example, a subject, Hellboy. We have the action, loves. So Hellboy is the one that is executing the action. He is the one that loves, not anybody else. Only Hellboy loves in this sentence. And then Liz is the object of the sentence because she is not loving, she is not executing the action, she doesn't love, but she is being loved. She's receiving the love of Hellboy. Hellboy loves. Who does he love? Who receives the action? Well, Liz. So Hellboy loves Liz. We have a subject, we have a verb, and we have an object. This is going to be very important later to understand a little bit more about the clauses and the relative clauses. So let's start there. Relative clauses. It says relative clauses give more information about a noun. So remember, a clause is an idea, a complete idea that has a subject and a verb. And we're going to use this new idea, this clause, to give more information about a noun, a person, a thing, or an object. Let's see some examples. This is a simple one clause sentence. Mavis is married to Johnny. We have a subject, which is Mavis. We have a verb, is, and we have an object. So Mavis is the subject. She's married. That's the verb. And who is receiving the action? Johnny. So Johnny is the object in that case. Now, we're going to use a relative clause to give more information about Mavis before continuing with the sentence. So first we start with the subject, Mavis. We're going to put a comma here to indicate that we're going to start a relative clause, that we are going to indicate that these next words are not going to be the subject. These next words are not going to be the object or the verb of the sentence. We're not going to continue. We're going to put a little pause on the sentence. And here is where we're going to start the relative clause. This is the relative clause. Who is Dracula's daughter? So we have here a subject, who is who, the verb is, and that's it. We have a subject and object, and then we have more information, Dracula's daughter. So that is a clause. We have a subject and an object, and we have a complete idea. And when we finish this relative clause, we're gonna put another comma to say, okay, we're finished. Unpause this. We start with a pause with the first comma, and then we put a play with the other comma. We finished our intermission talking more about the subject, and now we can finish the sentence. Is married to Johnny. Let's see another example. Here again, we have one sentence clause. It says, the Chinese Imperial Army fought the Huns. So in this case, the subject is the Chinese Imperial Army. The verb is fought. And the object, who did they fight? They fought the Huns. The Huns are the object. Now let's see this with relative clauses. Okay, it says the Chinese Imperial Army, and here comes the relative clause. We're going to give more information about the Chinese Imperial Army. And it says, which Mulan infiltrated. That's the relative clause. We give more information. Fought the Huns. And then we end the sentence with a period. Now, to continue learning about relative clauses, we need to understand what are relative pronouns. Remember that pronouns are words that we can use instead of subjects. Remember that pronouns are words that we can use instead of nouns, which they're going to replace a noun. Okay, so relative pronouns are used instead of a subject or object of the relative clause. They're going to replace the noun, either the subject or the object. For example, here we have a sentence with two clauses, one of which is a relative clause. It says, Miles Morales, comma, we start the relative sentence, who is Spider-Man, comma, we end the relative sentence and we continue the original sentence, found Peter Parker. So what we're interested in is the relative clause that we have between these two commas. It says, who is Spider-Man? So who is, in this case, the subject. Who. This is a relative pronoun because we're putting it instead of the subject. We can use a subject instead of that. We can say Miles Morales is replacing the subject Miles Morales. Who is used instead of Miles Morales in the relative clause. Now another example, Miles Morales found Peter Parker. Miles Morales is Spider-Man. So we have these two clauses that we use on top of it. And we can see that both of these clauses have the same subject, Miles Morales. So we're only going to use the first subject on the first sentence, Miles Morales, and on the relative clause, we're going to use a relative pronoun, in this case, who. So we don't continue, so we don't have to use the word or the subject Miles Morales 2 times in a row, because it's going to sound a little different. Okay, so here is a list of some relative pronouns that we can use. That, which, who, whom, whose. So, real quick, I want to tell you the difference between who and whom. I know they look very alike, but the difference is that who, we use it when we're replacing the subject. Miles Morales, who is a Spider-Man. And if we use whom, it's because we're replacing the object. Okay, now subject or object of the relative clause. So let's continue with this example. Mavis, comma, who is Dracula's daughter, comma, is married to Johnny. This sentence number 1, Mavis is the subject or object of the relative clause. What do you think? Mavis is Dracula's daughter. So is it the subject or object? In that case, is okay, and the next sentence is the Chinese Imperial Army, which Mulan infiltrated, fought the Huns. So in this sentence number 2, who do you think it's the subject or the object? So in this number 2, the army is the subject or the object of the relative clause. If we see it in a normal sentence, it says Mulan infiltrated the army. So in this case, is it the subject or the object? Okay, Yes, it's the object of the sentence because Mulan is the subject. In this case, we're using the pronoun of the relative clause to say, to talk about the army, not about Mulan. The army, which is the object. We're replacing the object with the relative pronoun which. So it says, if a noun is the object of a relative clause, we omit the pronoun. So, for example, let's see an example. Cusco was a llama who Pacha saved. In this case, the object Pacha in this case, Cusco is the object of the relative clause because Pacha saved. Who did he save? He saved Cusco. So Cusco was a llama who Pacha saved. Who, Cusco, is the object of the relative clause. So Cusco is the subject or the object of the relative clause when we say Pacha saved Cusco. So as we can see, is the object. So we can omit the relative pronoun who. So Cusco was a llama, Pacha saved. We can turn that normal way when we use a pronoun who, and we can just omit it when the subject of the sentence when the subject of the main clause is the object of the relative clause, we can just omit the pronoun. So Cusco was a llama who Pacha saved turns into Cusco was a llama Pacha saved. We don't need the who. It's optional. You can use it or you cannot. And that's it for this class. I hope you learned a little bit about what are relative pronouns, and we'll see you on the next one.